Hello everyone, my name is Pawan Podila, and today I want to talk to you about QuickLens, an app that I've been building for the last 7 years, specifically geared towards UI and UX developers and for exploring the UI on the screen. And it's a macOS app, and I would like to show you the app itself, but also talk about the journey I've taken and the lessons I've learned in building this app. So we're in 2020 right now, but the journey for QuickLens actually began many years back, more like 2013, and specifically in May 2013. Now, at this time, I was actually building an app which required very high fidelity of the interface, and the audience actually cared a lot about the animations, the richness of the icons and typography, and overall layouts on the screen. This was an app meant for the Mac and the iOS, so obviously there was a very high standard that we had to maintain. Now, at that time, I was exploring a bunch of different tools to see, how we can ensure that the app that I'm building and the UI that comes out on the screen actually looks pretty crisp and nice and matches the design. So we explored a bunch of different tools on the Mac App Store, like the rulers and color sampling and alignment tools, and looking up guides on screens and so on. And what I noticed is that these apps definitely were helpful, but each of these apps behaved very differently. They had different shortcuts, the UI was different, and it required me to kind of switch between these apps very frequently. And imagine having a menu bar cluttered with 7 different apps, each doing its own thing and having its own way of working. So obviously, I felt that there is something that needs to be improved over here. What we really wanted was a tool or an app that could do all of these things, but with a more consistent and a unified interface. And that's where the journey of QuickLens really began. As I said, this was mostly about bad UX, and so QuickLens began mostly to kind of address these problems. And the journey started back in May 2013. Now, QuickLens, of course, is a macOS app, but I learned a lot about building these kind of tools and for the past 7 years, and I'd like to share with you, some of those lessons along with the demonstration of QuickLens, the app that I actually built. Now, before I actually started building the app, I had to do a quick bit of experimentation just to make sure I understand how to build this app and how to deal with the macOS SDK, learning a bunch of different tools and languages in the process. So the first thing I started building was the flashlight app. And this was a very simple application that basically moved your mouse across the screen and would highlight a specific area on the screen. And this was mostly useful when you're demoing a design to your team where you want the attention of the audience to be focused on a specific area. So this was the first app that I actually built. Well, let me just quickly bring up that app in front of you right now. And the tool actually is called Monocle, and it's part of the QuickLens suite of tools. So what you see over the screen right now is a simple circle that I'm moving around with my mouse. And let me turn off the other things like the color and the zoom levels. I can, of course, zoom into this, and I can move it around. And let me also come out of the zoom right now. And to bring out the flashlight effect, I can actually dim rest of the screen. And now you can see that I'm actually dimming out rest of the screen so that the focus of the audience now stays on the area that I'm actually showing under the mouse. Right? So I can also expand the tool, the monocle. I can change even the shapes. Right? I can switch between different shapes depending on what I'm trying to show, and also zoom in a little bit if required. Now, this particular artwork that I'm showing in front of you is by a very famous artist called James Gurney, and we can actually find him somewhere over here. If you come closely, you can see that you can see the name Gurney, which is basically the artist who created this particular artwork. And you can also toggle between the focused mode and the unfocused mode where you see the entire screen. Right? So this was the tool that I first built, and this was more like an experimentation for me to ensure that I can actually build an app like this when I use the macOS SDK and come out with something very useful. Now, there were 4 important things that I had to focus on when building a tool like QuickLens, because this is a tool specifically meant for visual exploration. So precision, speed, colors, and control were the 4 pillars around which I built the entire application. So let's talk about each of these in turn, and I'll show you how this has been applied to the QuickLens as an application. So precision is very important, obviously, because I'm exploring pixels on the screen and everything has to be absolutely crisp. So one of the tools that I first built was Monocle, but after that I started building an ancillary tool called the Lens, which I'm bringing up right now. to really help me understand and make sure that everything that I'm drawing on the screen is actually pixel perfect. There's no anti-aliasing effect, and everything is coming out in absolutely perfect in terms of the pixels that are being rendered. Right? So the lens was a tool that I built to ensure that I could actually do these things and test my own application and ensure everything comes out right. So one thing you will see in Lens is that, of course, you can actually go anywhere on your screen and zoom in a little bit to see how the icons have been built. You can actually, when you move your mouse, the screen of Lens also changes, right? So as you move your mouse, you can actually see the zoomed in effect of the desktop right on the lens itself. Now this is great, but sometimes you just want to lock on a specific location on the screen. So you can do that with the M shortcut, and this will lock the screen. So now when I move the mouse, you won't actually see the lens screen changing over here. Now this is useful for actually measuring a few things. So I can now go into the pixel selection mode and quickly draw out a rectangle to see what's the size of this particular icon. And looks like it's about 22 by 23 pixels. Now this is pretty standard for a lot of the icons that you see on the menu bar inside the macOS. I can also use my keyboard shortcuts to actually go scroll left and right. Right, I can move left and right, and I can see that how the other icons have been structured. So it looks like a lot of these icons actually fit into this particular rectangle. So it's pretty standard, and you can actually verify that the other icons on the screen are following a similar pattern. So this is the pixel selection mode. The lens in itself is actually very powerful, and not only does it allow you to see things much more clearly by zooming in wherever required. Like for example, right now I am zoomed in to this particular area, right? But you can also actually try out other things like simulating the color blindness. And that's something that is used very heavily by the designers to ensure that the colors that are used on the screen are not something that will create problems when viewed by folks who have such disabilities. Right? So I can switch between the different color blindness situations. So for example, now I can see the achromatopsia, which is a condition where you don't see the red, blue, and green cones, right? So you also have protanopia, and these are all the different conditions. So I can see that the precision, the one that you see over here, is that it's not showing up in exact green because green is something that is not rendered properly when you have this particular condition. And the same goes for deuteranomaly, where you will see the condition being shown and simulated right in your desktop. Now this is a very useful way of trying out your interfaces. So once you have designed your interface, be it in Photoshop or Sketch or Figma, wherever you happen to use and create, you can actually test out that interface and make sure that the colors coming out are compatible with people who have color blindness situations and would not hinder in them understanding what is presented on the screen. So you can zoom in a little bit and make sure everything comes out as per the requirements. Now, Lens, of course, allows you to sample colors. So here I already have a list of colors that you can see, right? Let me just clear out this palette. You can create multiple palettes if you want inside Lens. And so let me go ahead and add a few colors like this particular green, right? And it's a colorblind green, so I can make sure what the value is and check what it is coming out as. I can also go back to the normal condition and then sample the same color. So now I'll get a different color. Obviously the greens are two different greens now, and you can use this to check and see that the value of green and how it is changing across different conditions. Of course, you can switch between different profiles, the color profiles. You can switch between various formats, whatever makes sense, and it's easier for you to capture the values. Now what I've shown you over here is that you can capture only just a single value with a shortcut, but sometimes you just want to capture all the colors in a specific area. So let's say I want to capture all the colors in this particular area. So I can just go into the auto palette mode and then simply drag out a simple rectangle, and it captures all the colors in that particular area. So note that you got the red, you got the black, and so it's a very quick way to kind of capture all the colors, create a quick palette, and use that to kind of inspire yourself to create a palette for your artwork or your designs. So that's about Lens, and Lens is actually quite a powerful tool. You can do a lot of different things over here, and you can also check for color contrast, which is something that I'm added recently, and it's coming on to the new version, which will be released soon on the Mac App Store. In color contrast, as you move your mouse, it shows you the foreground color, which are whatever is the color currently under the mouse, and how it works given a particular background, right? So the background right now is something you can select with the B key. So let's say if I pick a background like the white one, so let me change the background right now. So now when I move on the foreground, which is black, you can see that it's a AAA contrast, so which is actually quite good. Whereas if I go into the gray areas, you can see that the contrast has reduced quite a bit. So obviously it's a fail condition. And you can go into and you can try out different colors on the fly and see how it matches in terms of contrast against the background. So you can also look up against the colors in the palette. This is only showing up when you are turned on the contrast mode, right? So you can see the various color contrast values over here. So that's about lens and precision. And precision also is useful in a lot of other tools that I have. So if I bring up the various tools that's there in QuickLens, one of them is the guide, which allows you to create screen-wide guides. And notice that as I move these guides, the line is always absolutely perfect. There's no anti-aliasing, there is no jagginess happening on the line itself. And this is to ensure that the lines always show up as crisp and stay precise. Because ultimately these pixels actually matter, right? The location on the screen does matter, the pixel value does matter, and when you're exploring your designs, it's important that you actually see things more clearly, right? Oops. So going back to QuickLens, so I can come back here, and I can now adjust these guides on the screen, right? And so I can also create horizontal guides by using the Alt key and just placing them with the Alt space. So I can just keep creating these guides over here quickly. And notice that all of these guides have absolutely precise lines. So I can actually zoom in a little bit, and you can see these lines are actually always crisp. As you move around, they'll always stay crisp. So that's about precision. So let me just close out this and move on to the next item, which is speed. Now, speed is absolutely critical. I mean, you don't want a tool that is rendering things slowly and changing things slowly. So speed is actually very critical over here. And once you have more speed, you can do a lot of things with the tool itself. And one of the tools where speed actually mattered a lot was, of course, monocle, which allowed you to quickly zoom into different areas and move things around and dims the screen and so on. But the other tool where the speed actually mattered a lot was for crosshair. Now, crosshair is a tool which allows you to simply put a crosshair on the screen. It's good for quickly checking for alignments and stuff. So I can move this tool around, and I can check for alignments that okay, these boxes are actually aligned or not. Now, the crosshair has multiple modes, so I can switch to a mode where you can see real-time distances. Right, so now I can see distances between the screen elements based on their edges. And this happens at 60 frames per second, so it's very fast and allows you to do things with a lot of speed. Now here speed actually mattered a lot because now you have speed on the screen. You can actually go about doing things without worrying about how long it takes to get this particular task done. Like for example, measuring things, right? So many times if you didn't have this tool, you would have taken a screenshot of this and brought it into Photoshop or Sketch or Figma, and then use the tools inside that app to measure things. Whereas now is that you have things directly on the desktop, you have basically eliminated that workflow, and now you can focus more on your designs and ensure things can go much faster. So that's about crosshair. And you can also actually drop these measurements on the screen. So for example, I can hit the enter key and just drop these measurements on the screen. So let's say I want to measure how big is this button, so I can simply drop that, and I can see what the sizes are. Right? Of course, I can hit the delete key and clear all these measurements. Now, crosshair also has one more mode, which is the bounding box. And bounding box allows you to simply drag a rectangle on the screen and measure the size of elements. So now that I have dragged the rectangle around the follow button, I can see that it is 111 by 37 pixels. And let me drop that measurement by simply capturing it. So I'll hit the enter key and hold that measurement on the screen. I can now go ahead and measure the other follow buttons. Oh, it looks like they're all the same size. There's one more follow button here. Let me check and make sure even that is coming out at the same size. So now we have 3 follow buttons on the screen, and you can see that they're all coming out at the same size. And this ensures that you're not rendering things differently at different parts of the screen. So all of this is happening at 60 frames per second, right? So measuring things on the screen with this such precision is actually good and allows you to do things where you would have to do this by copying the screenshot and then doing it. And this works on retina screens as well as regular screens, and it's absolutely instantaneous, right? So you can actually simply drag out a rectangle and quickly see the size of things under the bounding box. So that's about speed. Now, colors is also an area where I had to focus a lot. Now, a lot of times the designs that you will be exploring may interfere with the colors of the tools of QuickLens. So for example, right now, orange is my primary color, right? So if I bring up a tool, like for example, the guides, right? Orange is my primary color, which I'm using. Now, this orange might interfere with the colors on the screen. So for example, you can see that as if I drag this into the orange area, the guide line is almost invisible inside the orange strip, right? So this could happen for designs where the primary colors of QuickLens could interfere and almost camouflage with the designs that you have. So in those cases, you can actually flip between various colors. So I can flip between yellow, I can go between various colors over here. And you can see that this will help you pick a color which adds maximum contrast against your designs and helps you explore the designs with the tools you have in QuickLens. So for example, now when I use the crosshair, let me switch to the crosshair mode, you can see that it can stand out against the yellow backdrop. Whereas if I didn't have this option, and if I use the yellow primary color, you can see this almost kind of hides the values, and it's very difficult to actually see what you're doing. So the colors, flipping between colors actually is something that I had to add very early on in the development of QuickLens, so that the tools don't interfere with your own designs. And that's the intent of this tool set. It has to stay out as much as possible so that you focus on your work and not on the actual app. So that's about colors. And these colors are not just for the primary values, but you can also switch between light and dark mode. So I can now switch between the dark mode and the light mode. And these modes are not really dependent on the system light and dark modes, but you can flip them on the fly. Since you have a simple keyboard shortcut, you can flip between the light and dark modes as you see fit, and whatever is your personal choice. So that's about the colors. Then control is an area which also required a lot of attention. We go back to the light mode for now. Now, what control really means is that the QuickLens as an app and the tools that it provides need to be controlled in multiple ways. You could do it with keyboard, with trackpad and mouse, and also with the touch bar on the Macs that support it. So QuickLens actually supports all of these different modalities in which you can control the tools, and that allows you to try out things and do things very quickly. So for example, now if I'm in the lens tool, so let me bring out the lens tool for now and just mark it over here and zoom in a little bit. Now I have on my touch bar the ability to zoom in. So I can zoom in very quickly, right? And you can do that easily because the touch bar slider is actually much more fluid than simply using the plus and minus keys for zooming in through the keyboard. Now, while I do that, I can also have a way in which I can use the touch bar and the keyboard simultaneously. So, for example, I can expand the size of the window as well as zoom in and out. So you can see that I'm actually expanding the size of the window and also zooming in and out at the same time. So all of this is possible because I'm exposing multiple ways in which you can control these tools, and that's what is required. Sometimes when you're deep in your designs and you don't want to take off your hand from the mouse or the keyboard and use your other hand and apply the controls available on the touch bar or on the trackpad and control these things. So control is a very important modality that you need to expose on these visual tools so that people can use it as easily as possible and in whatever ways that fit them. So those are the 4 pillars which I found to be the key driving factors for creating visual tools: precision, speed, colors, and control. Now, the QuickLens as an app obviously is available on the Mac App Store, but there are a few lessons that I learned over here which I think are worth reiterating. Now, when building a product like QuickLens, it almost seems like you are blowing a bubble and trying to maintain the forces that keeps the bubble in its shape, right? So there are forces inside and the forces outside, and you want to maintain the product in such a way that the inputs and feedback that you get from the outside are all not always conflicting with what you have in your mind. And sometimes the audience will drive a certain things for you and tell you that you're not doing it correctly, even though your gut might say something else. So you have to keep this tension where you'll have the feedback coming from the outside, but you'll have your own ways of doing things. But ultimately, what drives the actual change and the feature is what the audience really wants and whatever makes sense for your customers. It's almost like blowing a bubble and keeping the surface tension over there. The other big lesson I learned was that interaction design actually is can take a long time to get it right. The first few tools that I brought out and the first set of interactions that I had in the app were actually quite rudimentary, to be precise. And as I started exploring it with the audience and they gave me feedback, the interaction obviously matured over time. And now these things may not land on the first day itself, so interaction can take a while to get it right. But have the patience to do so, because once you get it right, it just becomes a joy to use. The other big thing is inertia. Now, a lot of times when the customer tells you that they don't like a specific feature, it's not behaving the way they expect, you could have a lot of inertia in making that change because you have obviously put in a lot of time and effort into building it. And when somebody doesn't like it, obviously it's painful a little bit. But I think you have to have the gut to ensure that you can keep building things and do what the customers really want. And that requires coming out of that inertia mode where you have created something for yourself, but then you have to actually break that and recreate things perhaps. So those are the three big lessons, I would say. Having the patience and the perseverance to get the interactions right, and that can take some time. Keeping the forces in such a way that you're kind of blowing a bubble and keeping the product consistent as you get feedback from the audience. And always be prepared to kind of throw out certain things and start from scratch again if required. Because building something good and something that is actually useful may allow you to make mistakes in the interim, but those mistakes will allow you to go to a direction where it'll actually make big difference for your audience. So that's about QuickLens. I would encourage all of you guys to take a look at it on the Mac App Store. You can look at the website and see what kind of features it provides. It's pretty rich in terms of all the things it does. And there are a bunch of different tools which I haven't even shown you in this particular presentation. Like, for example, the ruler tool, right? The ruler allows you to measure things on the screen, and as you move your mouse on the ruler, it shows you the relative location. And this ruler can be flipped between various orientations. You can also rotate the ruler, and these are the kinds of things which you don't see on apps on the Mac App Store, right? I haven't seen a ruler that does all of these things in a consistent fashion. There's also the frame tool that allows you to create frames and check for layouts. You can create presets and try out different things, right? You can put the frame in different modes. You can also capture videos and screenshots. It shows you the aspect ratios. And then we have the guide tool, which I only barely scratched the surface on. And I've shown you the crosshair as well as the monocle. And a lot of these things can be controlled from the toolbar palette itself. You can flip between the orientations. You can flip it, switch between and cycle between various colors. You can switch between light and dark modes. And there's also controls established at various levels, so you can control it via trackpad, mouse, keyboard, and even the touch bar. And some of these things can be controlled through the preferences, so you can do that as well and assign global hotkeys and do it that way. So I would encourage you to take a look at QuickLens. I think it will be a useful tool in your repertoire, and it can be the Swiss Army knife that you always wanted to explore the UIs on your screen. Thank you.